This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome back to Live Talk with Dr. B. Today we have our returning guest, Travis, with Dr. Smith, and we're going to go over a couple more graphs today. So, Dr. B?
Thank you so much. Dr. Smith, are you with us? Yes, and we have wonderful Travis also with us. Are you there, Travis? Yes, he has arrived with his
I
headset.
I lost. Yeah, I
All
lost y'all.
right,
Give me 1 second. I don't know what happened.
you're on. You're on, so we can see you and hear you.
All right.
Look at that
So what's
fun.
going on?
Travis, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I just don't know why that just happened. Okay, I'm good now. All right, let's restart, and I know what to do. I'm
All
gonna get off
right.
the camera here.
We
No,
already
you're
did.
on.
We're good.
All
Oh, we're
right. So
good.
yes,
Good.
what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to shut my camera off, and I will be back with you all after the demonstrations of all of the, I believe it's Vocal, and is that what it is, Doug?
Vocal, Daglish, and Watson. Now, Travis,
Okay.
I don't know if those names mean anything to you or not. Dr. Vocal,
Okay.
Dr. Daglish, and Dr. Watson. But before we jump ahead and before we jump right in, uh, Travis, you and I both traveled to Washington D.C. on Friday.
Yes.
I would characterize our time in Washington as highly successful. I'm not sure what word you would use, but we had the opportunity to visit a number of members, at least their offices, of the House Oversight Committee, and it is our hope that we can get the House Oversight Committee interested, looking into what happened over at HHS, Health and Human Services, that really allowed this opioid crisis to happen. In other words, there are a number of agencies that are tasked with making sure that the public health remains safe, and yet those agencies did not protect the public from the poisoning by the opioids. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, and it's obvious at the FDA methylation. That's an obvious one. And it's obvious that the CDC has been completely asleep at the wheel. And we will be highlighting the failures of the FDA and the failures of the CDC to the members of Congress and to the members of Senate. But we will also be highlighting two other divisions of HHS and for their failures. One is SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. That's who's in charge of doling out all the money right now, the billions and billions and billions of dollars that are going out for counseling. Now, none of us have anything against counseling, but counseling is not an effective treatment for genetic damage, and counseling is not an effective treatment for uh, adrenaline toxicity. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, so we're really looking at four divisions of HHS that failed: CDC, the FDA, uh, SAMHSA, and the fourth one is called NIDA, N-I-D-A, National Institute of Drug. Now, NIDA is charged with billions and billions of dollars for research into substance abuse and addictive substances. So NIDA was given all the research money. All the research money for opioids went to NIDA. And NIDA is run by Dr. Nora Volkow. Dr. Volkow has been there since May of 2003. Dr. Volkow has been at NIDA for the entire opioid crisis. And I would put forth Dr. Volkow is one of the reasons that the crisis occurred. So, Travis, what we want to do was show you an article by Dr. Volkow. So, Chrissy, if you get a chance, let's pull up the Volkow article. And Travis, I want you to know this was a very important article that was published in 2016 And this article was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Okay. Now, Travis, have we looked at this before? Refresh my memory.
No, sir. I don't believe we have.
Okay. All right. And just so you know, Travis, on the hand we were giving out Friday in Congress in Washington, this is what's on the
Okay.
back. We never really went over it with anybody, but this is what's there. And
Okay.
Travis, I want you to know that Dr. Volkow is really one of the authors of this brain disease model of addiction, this dopamine theory of addiction. Okay? And she has spent all the money, all the resources in trying to prove that this theory is true. And what we're going to put forth here is that in so doing, she completely ignored the methods of science, ways of science. So, Travis, if can you read the image before you, or do you want me to read it to you?
Are you talking about what's at the bottom, or are you talking about what's inside of
Yeah, what's at the bottom there?
Okay, yeah, it says all known addictive drug active reward regions in the brain by causing sharp increases in the release of dopamine, 11-13.
All right, so this is the big brain disease model of addiction. That's it in one sentence. Okay,
Okay.
that any and everything that's addictive, I don't care, chocolate, sex, cocaine, amphetamines, opioids, anything that's addictive, when you take it, when you pull it into your body, or when you do it, it causes this big release of dopamine in the reward regions of the brain. And this surge of dopamine is so incredibly wonderful, so blissful, such a journey into nirvana, that it basically hijacks the brain, and the individual is now just chasing that dopamine high at the expense of everything else in their life. Okay, that's the dopamine theory of addiction. And as you can see, it all hinges on this big, massive surge of dopamine in the brain, right?
Right.
So you would expect that if you gave somebody an opioid, you would see a big surge in dopamine in the brain, right?
Correct.
Okay. And we see here that the date of this publication in the very important New England Journal of Medicine is from 2016, January of 2016, if I'm not mistaken, and the editor is Dan Longo. So you would believe that if this was printed in 2016, that there's science behind that, and in fact, you see there where it says 11-13, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you see numbers like that in a scientific journal, what that means is those are called the references. So what that's saying is, oh, this is the science that's supporting this statement. Okay, so 11, 12, and 13 are other scientific articles that support this statement. So, knowing this is 2016, let's jump to the next article, which is Daglish, and this is either 2009 or 2011. I got to go back and check, but I think it's 2009. Now, what Daglish did was really simple. Daglish is an English. Daglish is an English investigator. Daglish simply went to the local methadone clinic and got some volunteers. Said, "Hey, you guys come into the clinic, and we're going to give you some opioids, and we're going to use a PET scan to see if we see any dopamine surge in your brain." PET scan is positron emission tomography. It's a very sensitive and well recognized, highly regarded way of doing research in the brain. The PET scan's just the standard. There's nothing exceptional about PET scan. So Douglas went to the local methadone clinic, got some volunteers, I think he probably paid them, to come into the clinic, gave them opioids, and used the PET scan to see if he could see any surge in dopamine. Now, given the fact this is 2009, and given the fact that this occurred before the 2016 article, you would expect that if everything was kosher here, Daglish would have seen a big surge in dopamine, right?
Correct.
All right, so the results of Daglish are right there, but let me interpret them for you. There was no surge in dopamine. There was no surge in dopamine. Daglish took volunteers, gave them an opioid, looked for a surge in dopamine. There was no surge in dopamine. Travis, do you see the problem with this study being from 2009 and then Volkow turning around in 2016 and saying all known addictive drugs cause a surge in dopamine?
Yeah, I see a big problem in that.
And she didn't even mention this article, did she?
I've never heard of it before.
So let's move on to the next article. Okay, the next article is by Dr. Watson. Again, this is British. It's almost the identical study. Okay, in fact, some of the same people are on it. Okay, and again, they go to the methadone clinic, they get some volunteers, they give them some heroin, and they use the PET scan and they look for a surge in dopamine. And you know, again, let me just read. Oops. Oh, I think, boy, I've done it now. I was going to read the quote to you, but that turned out to be not such a great idea. Travis, I don't know if you can see the quote or not.
Yeah, I can see it.
Can you read it?
Yeah, you want me to read it?
Yeah, read it out loud.
Okay.
It disappeared on my
It
screen.
says it says there was no detectable increases in striatal dopamine. How do you say it? What is it?
Striatal brain.
Striatal dopamine levels to either heroin reward or expectation of reward.
And the radionucleotide is specifically how they measure the dopamine. So again, Watson went to the local methadone clinic, got some volunteers, gave them heroin, looked to see if there was a surge in dopamine, and there was no surge in dopamine, and this is 2014. So here are two very well done scientific studies that showed absolutely no surge in dopamine when the individual was given the opioid. Now, let's go back to the Volkow study of 2016. And Travis, I think what you're beginning to realize here, and I can see the doubt on your face. I literally can see the doubt on your face. You're doubting that the current executive director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse would lie this much, would lie. You'd like to think people are honest, right?
Yeah, I'd like to think that in a perfect world.
But do you see the problem here where, and you read Dr. Volkow's quote, and let's bring up Dr. Volkow's quote again from 2016, and it clearly states all addictive drugs, not some, all. The emphasis is on the word all addictive drugs. And it doesn't just say an increase, it says a sharp increase. And yet when you look, it's not there, Travis. It's not there. Now, that is not being consistent with the scientific method. That's not how science works, Travis. Travis, you couldn't get away with that in your 10th grade science project.
No.
And yet, here's the national director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse in charge of all opioid research money, billions and billions and billions of dollars, and she's ignoring science because the science doesn't agree with her personal theory of the opioids.
Well, personal theory and then science is two different things.
I would say personal theories and fairy tales in science are two different things. She's putting forth the equivalent of a fairy tale. How can you make a statement like that when there's no scientific evidence? And how does she get away with it, Travis?
I have no idea. That's a good
Do you
question.
see? Well, actually, let me take a back seat here. Okay, let me just go quiet. And Travis, you and I have developed a good working relationship. I can tell by the look on your face, you got this straight in your head. You see what this woman said, and then you saw the scientific evidence, and you see that those two things do not go together. And you see what's happened with the opioids in this country, and the number of people that have been harmed. Okay, and how do you feel about this?
I mean, I'm pretty angry about it because if there's no science to back up the statement that she's making, it shouldn't be allowed. She shouldn't be allowed to say it because, I mean, as you said, it's like a fairy tale at that point. If there's no science behind it, it shouldn't be allowed to be said. You should have to base your theories or whatever you're saying on something based on the science, based on the actual facts. I mean, that's how I feel.
We use a type of science in the world today. Everybody that follows science, we all follow the same type of science. It's called Popperian science. It's named after Karl Popper. Karl Popper was Austrian. He fled the Nazis and went to England and developed his thesis of Popperian science. One of the hallmarks of Popperian science is this thing called the falsification principle. Falsification principle. The falsification principle says when you're working with science, it's hard to prove things are true. It's much easier to prove that things are false. But once something is proven to be false, you must recognize that it is false. For instance, if I said all birds can fly, and that was my theory, and then Travis, you then put an ostrich, penguin in front of me and said, here are two birds that cannot fly, then you
Right.
have disproven my theory, right?
Exactly.
And if I continue to run around and say all birds can fly, I am no longer in keeping with the ways of science, correct?
Correct. Don't forget about the emu.
I had another one, right? So that is, and that's called the falsification principle, and it's one of the fundamental science today. You cannot continue to repeat things that have been proven false. Now, let's look at the example of Dr. Volkow. We saw that Daglish did a good study, no surge in dopamine when opioids were given. We saw that Watson did a good study, no surge in dopamine when the opioids were given. We then saw the director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse, Dr. Nora Volkow, who, by the way, is a PET scan expert, completely ignore the Daglish and Watson studies. She doesn't even mention them. Okay. And I put forth that that is not in keeping with the falsification principle and the methods of Popperian science. You got two studies that say it didn't happen, and yet she's still running around saying it did happen. You can't do that and then call yourself a scientist. And that's my problem with these psychiatrists. She is a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist in this country, in an effort to prove this fairy tale of opioid addiction, have ignored the ways of science. And the problem is, in so doing, they have harmed and killed and contributed to the death of a lot of people. So when we go to Congress, as we have, and when you and I say there are a number of divisions of HHS, Health and Human Services, that need to go before the committee, it's obvious why the FDA needs to go. It's obvious why the CDC needs to go. But do you see why we also put forth why NIDA, Dr. Nora Volkow, needs to sit in front of members of the House and explain why she, in her position, and spent billions and billions of taxpayer dollars the whole time ignoring the ways of science?
Oh yeah, yes I do, and I
She
agree that
needs,
she should have to do that.
in fact, B knows how I feel. It's my personal feeling that Dr. Nora Volkow is the poster child. She's the poster child for the opioid crisis. Her arrogance just irritates me like you wouldn't believe. B knows that if she wants to irritate me and get a rise out of me, she just sends me a text picture of Dr. Volkow. That's how much this irritates me. In fact, I'm going to predict that tomorrow, Dr. B is going to have a picture of Dr. Nora Volkow just to show us all, just to irritate me. B, are you there? I'm trying to irritate you, B.
I was trying to figure out how I could get it on today.
No, well, okay, I hear you. I'm sorry, but this woman's existence just irritates me. The arrogance of thinking that you can put your own personal opinion ahead of the ways of science and get away with it and expect the public to just be like sheep and follow your word. It just irritates me so much. So, Travis, can you still hear us, Travis?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
All right. So, Travis, we put forth that if Dr. Volkow had done her job and spent the money on the opioids appropriately, the opioid crisis would not have happened. If she had done her job, the opioid crisis would not have happened. Remember that study from 1990 that showed that when the mice went into opioid withdrawal, they lost control of the nerve going to the adrenal gland?
Yes.
That was 1990. The very next thing that needed to happen was that same study needed to be done with humans. And then the opioids never would have been approved by the FDA. The reason that study was never done was NIDA. These guys are so convinced of this fairy tale of the brain disease model of addiction, of the surge in dopamine, that they completely ignored the studies that showed the surge not of dopamine, but of the adrenaline.
But again, like my question is, they don't have the science to back up what they're saying. Are they really convinced, or are they just trying to convince everyone else that's what's going on? You know what I mean? Because if there's no science, then I don't see how they could be convinced.
I tell you what, let's do. Travis, are you going to be with us tomorrow?
Yeah, I probably should. Yeah, should be.
All right, tomorrow I'm going to pull up a diagram, some artwork out of Dr. Volkow's 2016 article,
Okay.
and I'm going to put it in front of you, and we're going to read it together. And Travis, you've never seen such gobbledygook in your life. It's literally made up words, made up concepts, but they use really big words. Okay, they use really big words like neuroadaptations.
Okay.
Okay, Travis, I went to school a very long time. I'm not sure I can tell you what a neuroadaptation is. These are practically made up words, but that's how they do it. They throw out all these really big words so that the average physician is kind of like, wow, they must know what they're talking about. They're using words even bigger than the words that I use.
Right. Correct.
And that's how they got away with it. They got away with it by doing a pretty good job of putting lipstick on the pig and making it look like science, when in fact it really is just lipstick on the pig.
Right.
And we'll look at that tomorrow. So B, is that okay we do that tomorrow?
Sure it is. That's fine.
Okay.
along
I'll
with
pull
Nora's picture.
I'll pull that graphic out, and what I'm going to do ahead of time are the big words that are on there. I'll write them down on a piece of paper that I'll have with me so that I can read them without having to touch the screen, because when I touch the screen, everybody goes away, and I clearly don't know what I'm doing when I touch the screen. But I'll write the words down, and Travis, what I'll do is I'll send you a copy of that graphic, and do me a favor, Travis. Don't waste 30 seconds trying to understand the words because they're
Okay.
made up.
Okay.
And Travis, on this image that I'm on this graphic that we're going to go over tomorrow, is their theory of what withdrawal is.
Okay.
I'll be curious to see how you react to that. They basically say that withdrawal is a lack of good feelings.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's all it is. It's just a lack of good feelings.
So again, they're going back to the dopamine is what they're relating to.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not true.
It's garbage like you wouldn't believe. I mean, it's garbage I wouldn't even put on, I can't put garbage out at night because the skunks come. Okay.
I mean, you get physically. Sorry, what were you saying?
I'm ranting and raving about the garbage.
Yeah, I don't understand how they say it's a lack of feelings when you can physically feel your withdrawal symptoms. I mean, you're physically ill, you're physically sick. I don't understand how that is just all feelings. That makes no sense whatsoever.
But Travis, this is the executive director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse. This is the renowned Dr. Nora Volkow, who, by the way, her grandfather was Leon Tolsky, who was the one of the leaders of the Russian Revolution. So this is a great intellectual.
Sounds like it's a lot bigger than just them or something, because why else would you be saying things that you have no scientific, back to, to say it? I mean, there's no proof.
Travis, clearly you're not understanding. When you're as brilliant as Dr. Nora Volkow, you don't need proof. You're Dr. Nora Volkow. If you say it, therefore it is.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, Albert Einstein always had to have proof of everything he was doing. I mean, he always showed proof.
Well, clearly Albert Einstein was not at the same level of Dr. Nora Volkow, whose grandfather was Leon Tolstoy.
Oh, I see.
The great Russian. This is the problem with intellectuals. The problem with intellectuals is they're not. But they believe they are. And therefore, few things are as dangerous as an intellectual, in my opinion. And Nora Volkow.
Yeah, it sounds like she is.
Well, B, that's all we got today then. Looking forward to picking up on this tomorrow. I always look forward to a conversation about Dr. Nora Volkow.
Yeah, I can tell you don't agree with anything she says. Yeah, but it doesn't make sense, though. It just doesn't make sense.
Travis, she killed a lot of people. She is a physician that killed a lot of people. And by not saying anything about the Daglish and the Watson studies, she lied to her fellow physicians. She lied to me. Lied. She was in a position where she had the trust of the public. She was in a position where she had the trust of the healthcare community, and she used her position of power to lie and try and advance herself. And in so doing, she set the stage where we're close to 3 million people now that have died.
Sounds like she lied to everybody, the entire world.
So you
All
agree
right,
Congress
it's
needs to,
time for Chrissy to take it away. Did you hear our bell? All right, so Chrissy, it's all yours.
Well, thank you for joining in live with Dr. B. We are here every Monday through Thursday at 12:30, and we do thank our guests for returning. It's been an absolute pleasure knowing that we are shared more information. So y'all have a good day.
And
Bye-bye.
thank you for joining.